name is Megan. I am 24 years old. I was diagnosed with Hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome earlier this year, so that makes it January of 2019. However, this is something that I've been going through for a number of years now. I first became majorly symptomatic around 2010, 2011, so I was about 13, 14 years old. So it's been a while, so I thought that I would start creating videos with some tips and tricks that I have learned over the years and just information that I have gathered, because I find that the way that most of us learn about our conditions is through each other and through networking rather than necessarily the medical profession, which is unfair but seems to be how it goes. I would like to start by saying the obvious, that I am not a doctor, I am not in the medical professional work environment. I am a sufferer. I am someone with this condition, so this is from my experience and things that I have read. So obviously do not take my word as 100% truth, because that's not necessarily it. I'm not medically trained, so I just want to make sure that is out there, so you don't get the wrong idea. So when I say that I have Hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, I want to basically, to begin with in this first video, describe what that is and what that means. So Hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos comes under a group of genetic disorders called EDS. So EDS is Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, okay? So this is a genetic disorder that impacts your connective tissues, mainly due to defects in collagen production. So basically, what I'm saying is there is a genetic reason for how you are, which means it is 100% not your fault, which to some people might sound a little weird to say, but I personally went through a couple of diagnoses such as ME and fibromyalgia before I got here. And there's always that underlying fear that I was somehow responsible for the state that I found myself in, that it was all my fault, and that even though I didn't know what was causing it, it was somehow down to me. Whereas this is basically saying it's genetic, okay, it's in the genes, it is not your fault. Most people inherit it from parents, grandparents, and that's how it's passed through. A small minority of people actually, it just mutates in them, so they're kind of the first of their family line to receive it. So EDS went through an overhaul in 2017. So there are now 13 subtypes of EDS, so Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, okay? So 12 out of the 13 types, so there are 13 subtypes, 12 of these are identified through genetic markers. This means a geneticist can go in and find mutation in the gene sequence. The one type that does not yet have a genetic marker is the hypermobile type. And this is also believed to be the most common of the EDS types, so that does make things a little bit difficult. So that is why most people, if doctors or surgeons believe you have EDS or some variant of EDS, will refer you to a geneticist. But obviously, if like me you are suffering from hypermobile EDS, there is currently not a genetic marker for them to find. So in summary, I just wanted to make sure that you are aware of EDS and that hypermobile EDS is a subtype. What I'll move on to now is the checklist itself and the people who can diagnose hypermobile EDS. Because there's now a checklist and it's not found through genetic markers, which I mentioned before, a range of people can actually spot and diagnose hypermobile EDS. Most people are still diagnosed through a geneticist or a rheumatologist. Most people will be referred to either one of these. However, it is possible to be diagnosed from other sources. I was personally diagnosed with an orthopedic surgeon. So some GPs, apparently there are some people out there who have been diagnosed just by their GPs who understand what it is, have the checklist, and are knowledgeable on the condition. The difficulty seems to be finding the medical professionals who know what it is. That seems to be the biggest hurdle out there. Once you have someone who knows what it is and believes you, then that's a step in the right direction. So I've got my laptop here, so I'm just going to go through the general diagnostic criteria. I'm going to put a link at the bottom in the notes section so that you can find this yourself, because it is a little bit complicated and very long, so I'm just going to give you a short version. So there are 3 different criteria, basically, and the first one is around generalised joint hypermobility. So how hypermobile are your joints? There are different sections for where you fit, what your age is, what your sex is, so different people have different levels of what they're supposed to score on something called the Baton scale, okay? So the Baton scale is something that is scored from 0 to 9, and it apparently judges how hypermobile they feel your joints are. Now, some people score really highly on the Baton scale. Some people are always 9 out of 9 every single time. I just passed the hypermobile type, but some of the key things that they test in the Baton scale, for example, the elbows and the wrists, I'm not actually hypermobile in those particular areas. But other areas where I am hypermobile, such as my jaw, my shoulders, my hips, my ankles, aren't actually tested by the Baton scale. So don't panic if you feel that, oh my goodness, I'm not 9 out of 9, that means I can't have it, I'm a fraud, it's not possible, I'm not hypermobile enough. There are other things on the checklist that add up as well. So don't immediately panic, okay? So there are some kind of movements which are looked for by medical professionals, and if you can do them, great. If not, don't immediately panic, okay? So the next criteria is other things and other symptoms that might show up in your symptom list, basically. And these are other things that may be linked to EDS. They might be a common symptom across several different of the subtypes. So the ones I've got here are unusually soft or velvety skin, mild skin hyperextensibility, unexplained stria, so this is like stretch marks that are unexplained without significant like weight gain, weight loss, that kind of thing. So just marks on the body that don't really make much sense. There are things like abdominal hernias on here, I can never say these things, atrophic scarring. So I have what they call paper thin scarring. So on my knee, one of my scars just doesn't look like a traditional scar. It's a little bit weird. Again, you've got things like pelvic floor hernias and prolapses. You might have dental crowding or a really high or narrow palate up here. There's a couple of other signs, so there's the Walker sign and the Steinberg sign, and they all have names that they might ask you to do. You might have an arm span ratio that is notable. Mitral valve prolapse, obviously this is to do with your heart, so that's a bit more significant, as well as aortic root dilation. You do not have to have every single one of these, again, to count as being hypermobile EDS. So it's kind of taking bits and pieces and the general adding up of all the symptoms is how you are diagnosed. So don't worry again if you're like, oh, I do not have all of those, but there might be things that pop out to you like, oh, I honestly didn't realise that was a symptom, I didn't realise that was a thing, that I went through that. Again, they look for if you have a positive family history, so if people know, for example, that their first degree relatives, so your mum, your dad, your brother, etc., have their own mutation or they're pre-diagnosed, so that is a direct link because they know it's an inherited disorder. For me, that's a bit of a weird one, so they don't think or we don't think my parents have it. However, if you look at my brother, he has Marfanoid characteristics. He doesn't have Marfan syndrome, but he has characteristics of a Marfanoid, which is another connective tissue disorder. There's definitely something in my family, just not entirely sure what, basically. Another thing they're going to look for is pain. This is one of my biggest symptoms, and I'm going to do a whole other video about pain because it's the bane of my life, basically. So they're going to look for musculoskeletal pain in 2 or more limbs, recurring daily for at least 3 months, or chronic widespread pain for more than 3 months. Also, they're going to look for recurrent joint dislocations or joint instability where there hasn't been a trauma. So obviously, if there has been a trauma, that would explain the dislocation, but if it was just kind of out of nowhere, then it's going to be suspected. They also basically, it says they need to rule out other reasons why you might have these symptoms. So they want to rule out the other types of EDS. They want to rule out things like lupus, rheumatoid arthritis. So they want to basically make sure that you don't have other issues, and so that by ruling them out, you kind of are left with a hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos diagnosis, because again, it's quite hard to diagnose compared to a lot of the other ones. So I will make sure that I have a link to that checklist in the bottom of the video. And then, yeah, I will move on to my other videos, and I'm going to do tips and tricks in dealing with different parts of day-to-day life. I just wanted to do a very quick, very short introduction, as in what I'm talking about in my other videos, or if you've never heard of it, or a doctor's just mentioned it at passing, and you're like, I have no idea what that is, kind of thing. So yeah, not most of my information, quite a lot of my information is from a UK charity, Ehlers-Danlos.org. A lot of this information is on their website. There's a lot of things and links that are attached to that you might find very useful, so do feel free to obviously go on that. I'm not going to do much more on the introduction because there are other YouTube videos out there explaining it in a lot more detail, so feel free to look at those as well. So thank you for watching my introduction. Hopefully I've been of some use. Hopefully I've made you think of some things, and hopefully you will be interested in watching some of my other videos. Thanks very much.